Ah,
Good to see. Good to see.
Done. Bravo.
Well, certainly Shatler got something to say about renovating buildings.
I'm sorry.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. You have been gone. You went through it already.
Yes, and actually the aftermath of it is while you are at work, it's an issue. But once you come back to the theater and discover that some things are fantastic and some others are sometimes more problematic than they were before.
Yeah.
It's another kind of issue, but well, it's.
But you were not involved as deeply as you wanted to be, as I understand.
It was a strange thing because from a legal point of view, we were absolutely not involved because the building belongs to the city of Paris. The city of Paris had organized the tender for the renovation works, and so we had no link. The city of Paris was paying for the renovation works, but of course we were around the table as experts, helping the companies which were doing the works to do the works according to what opera is and what we need to function. But it was sometimes a bit difficult because when some choices had to be done which had a cost, of course the city was very reluctant to putting more money on the project, and sometimes we had to push so that another arbitrage would be done to to drop something and to be able to do other things. But it was a strange situation, but eventually it worked out not too badly, but
not too badly. Yeah. We can come back maybe tomorrow. We can also get you involved in the discussion. That would be great.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
I think we can get started. There's no one waiting in the waiting room now, so.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, thank you. Well, welcome back then, everybody, after a short break. And I think, as Audrey said, you probably rushed over your email box and tried to fix everything in like 15 minutes. But now we are going to continue and talking about renewing our opera houses. And it will be an expectation in between renovation and new buildings. And I would like to go back a little bit to where we started this morning or this afternoon with Paddy talking about the Green Theatre. And then when we moved over to the co-production theme, and you could say that everything will be included, of course, in the way we are going to look up on what is the new or renovated opera house. What is it going to deliver into the future? And I will start by saying, I think every house, either it's renovation or it's a new building, it has to have a sustainability for about 100 years into the future, because we know about the cost and the thing that is so heavy on having any kind of cultural building built today or renovated today. I have a panel with me here, and they are different angles which they will talk about the different houses. From Frankfurt, we have Achim Sieben, and from Düsseldorf, Alexander Stempler-Brown, and from Geneva, Aviel Khan. But before I give the word to to my colleagues here, I would like to tell you the story about my own house in Stockholm, the Royal Swedish Opera. And I would also connect a little bit to what Henning said when he was going to provoke us one or the other way, as Nicholas asked him to do. He said, well, it's probably going back to the same as it was before the pandemic. And my question will be, but do we really want it to go back to what it was before the pandemic? And that will also go into the discussion about the renovation and the building of new opera houses. What kind of goals do we have for the buildings of the future when we are supposed to deliver maybe art in another shape, in another form? And as we talked about now, the visibility and the complexity of making it ecological, global wise, having the sustainability and also taking care of all the things that we need to have for being able to develop the art of opera. But if I start with the Royal Swedish Opera, I have been managing this company now for 10 years, and I have been in a house project for 10 years. When I started, there was a really a very need of a big need of taking care of the building. And of course, the work environmental for our employees, for all what we're supposed to do, were definitely in need. And we had lack of rooms. We still have a lot of lacking rooms. And the discussion about the new opera house in Stockholm had been an ongoing issue for many years. Of course, Norway got the latest house. Before that, it was Finland, and before that, it was Copenhagen. So I think there was a little bit of jealousy that why doesn't Stockholm have a new opera house? Anyway, the decision came in 2013 from the government that they rather would like to see if we could renovate the building and extend the building. The building is from 1898. And your imagination is already on for the fact that how do you extend a building from 1898, first of all? Is there a landmark that is big enough to do something? And how do we incorporate the design of the old building to somehow maybe have a crash in a modern design with the rest of the part that we are going to build then? Or does it have to look alike, the whole building as a one set? We were assigned to make a pre-study and to present that in a couple of years later. And we did a really very, very good work together with the owner of the building and came to the conclusion that it is actually possible to renovate, really heavily renovation inside the old building, apart from the culture historical parts as the auditorium and entrance and some of the big rooms for the audience that we are not, we can't touch them because of historical culture value. The report, however, showed that we can definitely extend the building towards the park on one side. And what we could have aimed for and what we wanted and what we could see that was possible to have were 4 new ballet rehearsal rooms. There was a smaller stage, a big orchestra rehearsal room, and also spaces for having different kind of events and different kind of other public, whatever we wanted to do to also introduce new audience into maybe other areas of the art of opera in smaller productions. So it looked actually very good. And we also had an estimate of the cost, which was about then 3.5 Swedish billion crowns. That is 350 billion euro. So it was sort of, you know, you could have said it's handleable, definitely. If you get so much out of it, it should be possible. We have now awaited for these years. The last report that we left to the government was in 2018. And we also had some supplying in 2019, but that means that we had a really full report. So it would have been possible to make a solution or to get some kind of decision. However, that has not happened. And the project is now put on sort of a break. There is not decision no, there is not decision yes. But in 2019, there was a second assignment coming up to the owner of the building to find out if we could have a cheaper solution that was in the original budget that the government suggested even before they had seen the pre-study. And that was for 2 billion Swedish crowns, 200 billion euros, which was without the extension of the building. We have just left the report. It's only 2 days ago when we left the report saying that that is a total disaster, because we're actually getting a smaller building than what we have today. We get less square meters, we get less rooms, we get less infrastructure, we get more problematic way of how to deal with productions also around the spaces and the area around the stage. I don't know today what this is going to be like. I know that the building needs to be renovated and I can fully support that. But to have a project where you actually have to realize that you will possibly not be able to continue with what you are regulated to do, playing opera and ballet, and we have classical ballet. So that's also a reason why we need these much bigger locations. Whether this is a decision that is going to be taken by the government, we don't know that today. And of course, the discussion has been an ongoing issue still over the past 10 years. Why isn't it better to have a new built opera house in Stockholm in any case? And this is the first time where we have been rather frankly about the fact that if there is no other solution, if the first project with the extension of the building is not going to be approved, then we would like to have an investigation about a new opera house. There is a company in Stockholm who is actually led by one of our former technical directors at the Royal Swedish Opera. And he, together with a team, has already created a new opera house, the vision of a new opera house, the drawings of the opera house, the location of the new opera house. And it's set by the waterfront in the center of the city. It's a beautiful project, and it's a project that could be possible, definitely. They have been working on it now for, I think, at least 15 years. I think what we should just realize that they have also the workshops in this new building. However, we are already building new workshops outside the city. And to put the workshops on a landmark that is very valuable in the center of the city, I would not suggest that as a good idea at all. I think what I would wish for is rather to have a very neutral investigation about what would it be to have a new opera house in Stockholm. And I think the worry is, of course, the costs. But the second problem, and this is something that I will also address to some of you, the second problem is that how do we then get released from the old building of today? We have seen in Denmark the combination of getting as a gift a new opera house, and at the same time they have been entitled to run the old house parallel all those years. It's very costly. And those are the things that I think should have been sorted out first of all. What do you actually do with the old opera house if you cannot continue to have productivity in that building? And how do you actually release it from our obligation as a national state to have to try to do some kind of productivity there? So that will be definitely a question for the future and for the politicians. I think some of my colleagues here will also tell that there has been elections between. If you have a project that is ongoing for so many years, it probably will happen that you will have a government election in the middle of somewhere. And then you get the feeling that it will start all over again to persuade and to, get all the evidence that to prove that your project is really important. But the last thing I would like to say before I turn to my colleagues here is But what do we want from an opera house in the future? Because if I will be a little bit provocative, then also when we talk about the houses, if I look around at the houses that has been newly produced, they more or the same. They look like every opera house in the inside, on the inside, not always on the outside. You can see that there are designs. I mean, Norway is the most fabulous, maybe, example in the nearest time, with something that was extraordinary also for the tourism, that people came even if they were not, even if they didn't know what was going on inside the building, they were interested in the outside and the design and the look of the house, and they could use the house from the outside. But my question is really, what do we actually want? What kind of opera house do we would like to have in the future? I remember some years ago when we had a session almost about the same topic, and I think it was in Birmingham. You can correct me now, Nicholas. There was a festival somewhere in England who had built or was about to build a new house that was literally just wide open area spaces, where you then actually could put and design and create it with anything depending on what kind of productivity you wanted to have in the building.
It's the factory in Manchester.
In Manchester, thank you very much. And I have to say, at that session, that was, to me, some of the most inspiring ideas I've seen in a long time, because it was totally different to what we're used to today. We've also seen opera houses which has been new built, and in a combination of being a concert house and an opera house. And you can divide, or you can open up incredible areas for doing concerts with also stage-wise productions. I don't know whether this is something that we want to have, and if it's possible. I know all the complexity, I can assure you. And when it comes to the word of acoustic, not to mention all the other things that we need, especially for the art of opera. But I will put that question to you and to the rest of all our participant in this session. Think about it. What would you actually like for a new opera house in the future? And then you can tell us. I would like to go then to Achim. Achim, you are also in a process, and I think you have been for quite some time now. So please tell us about your project in Frankfurt.
Yeah, Birgitte, thank you very much. I try to split my screen so that you can see my presentation. So I hope you can see it right now. So hello from Opera Frankfurt. I'm very happy that I have the possibility to talk to you and to talk a little about the future of the Opera Frankfurt. Well, not the future of the opera, but of the building of the opera, of course. And to begin with, I brought these three pictures. The first one shows the old theater building. Well, this one is not from 1898, but it's from 1902, so more or less the same age. That was the old theater of Frankfurt, where they played drama. There was a second location where there was the old opera house. The old opera house was bombed out and burned out after World War II. And Birgitte, you asked, what can you do with an old building? That old opera building was renovated, I think, in the 80s, and became a venue for concerts. So there's a concert hall in it, and for congresses. So completely different use, and it has nothing to do with Opera Frankfurt, but it's still in use as the old opera. And whereas this building here was in use after World War II, this stage could be used by the opera, and the city of Frankfurt decided in the 50s that they want to become this location here as the new cultural heart of the city. And they decided to build a second stage very close to this old drama building. So the famous Frankfurt double theater was born. You can see in 1963 this new double theater was opened, and the most characteristic sign is this glass facade, which binds together the two stages. So this glass facade binds together the stage for opera and the drama stage. And of course, the idea was to have a very transparent society, a very democratic society. You can see the people in the opera from outside. They can see you from inside. So it was very significant. And of course, this new stages were built on at the same location where this old building was before. And the third picture shows something like the future building. It's pure fantasy, so there has not been an architectural competition yet. But you see, I'm very optimistic because I put the realization in this century. But it's completely uncertain when it will happen. But what this shows, it's very interesting because they imagine the new opera as, of course, a new building for the stage combined with the skyscraper, which is very characteristic for Frankfurt. And this skyscraper could partly be used by the opera, but it's also open to use, for example, by a hotel or to put bank offices in it. It's a question of how to finance the whole project. So before I come to the story of the renovation, a side remark. Some people started in the city of Frankfurt to collect signatures, and they want to, they wanted to have a referendum because they absolutely want to rebuild this old 1902 building. And they say, which is true, there are still parts of these old walls included in the new building from 1963, and you just have to get rid of this, all this architecture around, use these old walls and rebuild or reconstruct the 1902 theater. The referendum has officially already been rejected by the city, and these people are more, I would say, they are part of the populistic right-wing parties, so they are heard, but I think they are not so important for the ongoing discussion. So only a side remark. Let me try to show you the next picture. We started, all this started when we had a first feasibility study from 2014 to 2017. As normal, we had a lot of experts examining everything in the building. So with the expert opinion on the roof, the facade, the fire protection, all the structural and technical installations were examined. And finally, they came up and decided that there is a need for an extensive renovation, or they said better new buildings. At that time, that was a shock for the politicians, and they decided to study the study, and they choose a group of people, a so-called Stabsstelle, and they looked deeper into the details and had a look at the feasibility study, and came up in 2020 with a result that they recommend to have new buildings instead of a renovation, new buildings. And for these new buildings, they propose different variants concerning where to have these new buildings. Then finally, and this is where we are right now in 2020, we got an official decision by the city councillors. They voted to have new buildings, yes. But the problem is they didn't yet determine which sites or where these new buildings should be built. So here you can see I brought you these 4 variants which are discussed right now. In blue you see the new building for the opera, and in green would be the new building for the drama. You see in variant 1 and 3 the new opera is built at the location where the theater is right now, and we have to find a new place for the drama or for the theater. In variant 2, we build a new drama theater at the place where the theater is right now and find a new location for the opera building. And in variant 4, we build both new opera and drama, but at the old location. So all these costs for these 4 variants, they vary between 800 and 900 million euro. This is also because we insisted that the costs for an interim should be included in this examination. And the variant we prefer, and which is the, let's say, less expensive, is variant number 2, because here you would start building the new opera at a different site. When the building is finished, you can move the opera in that new building. Then you have to find an interim for the drama, which is easier and less costly to find an interim for the drama. Then you build the new drama, and then they come back when the building is finished. There is a 5th variant, which I don't mention here. This is just putting the 2 new buildings at the very east of the city. I think this is very unlikely to happen. So I only showed you these 4 variants. Variant number 2, which is what we prefer, would result in a new, let's say, in a new cultural mile in Frankfurt. You see here is a strip of green at this place here, where you see the new drama department. This is the location where the opera and the drama is right now. But in variant 2, we would have a line of cultural buildings, starting with the old opera, which is here, which is the venue, as I said, for conferences and concerts. Then you would have an ethnological museum. This next building could become the new opera. So this is the flat building and the skyscraper. Then you have Museum of Modern Art, the new drama department, and close to the Main River, you have a new Jewish museum, which opened last year. So, and in terms of green, you see that the opera would take a little of the green here, but we can give it back by, because the new drama does not need the whole space as the opera and drama needed before. So all in all, it's the same amount of trees. Let me put it like that. Okay, so now we want, of course, or we need the politicians or the city to vote for this variant 2. But meanwhile, as Birgitta also mentioned, we had elections in 2021. So completely new political landscape. We have 4 parties trying to form a coalition right now. So we have to wait what the outcome of the negotiations will be. And a second thing which happened is that while the glass front, so this part here, of the building, has become a historic monument. So it was declared a historic monument and is listed right now and must somehow be preserved. Yeah, so the second picture is a look from inside the foyer. Outside you see the skyscrapers, but you can imagine if we really had to preserve this front, then we have not so much possibilities for an architectural competition, and it would completely influence the planning for the space around the building. So this is really a problem which arose right now. So if before we can come up with the next steps, these 4 questions have to be somehow answered. So first, which I mentioned, is what do the coalition negotiations bring? Is everybody still for the new buildings? What Birgitta also mentioned, who are the new people in charge? So I'm sure we have to step back a little and explain the same things again and again, which we have explained for years, but we have to do it. I forgot to mention that this location where the new opera should be built doesn't belong to the city. So we hope that they find a model or a deal that they really can get that property. But as you can imagine, talking a lot about this ground does always make it more expensive. So they have to get the ground. And the question of the historic preservation. So what does it mean that this glass foyer or glass front is under protection right now? And only if these questions are answered, we can really have an official vote on the location issue, and then of course start the architectural competition. When that will happen, I can't say right now. I hope not too long in the future. Yeah, but you see that these questions are not easy to answer. So this is where we are right now in Frankfurt. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion afterwards.
Well, thank you very much, Achim, for your presentation. And can I just ask you before we turn to Alexandra, today when you have the theater and you have the opera in the same building, do you have, can you share the resources then in between the two arts?
Yeah, we have the workshops in the building right now, but the transport system within the building is not the best. So we have different levels in the building, which is also the reason why the renovation is so costly, because somehow you should get a better solution for the transport system. But at the moment we use the same workshops in the building. Yeah.
So if you then get two separate places for the opera house and the theater, do you have to add personnel in that case?
That's a good question. It's not yet sure where. That's also depends on which variant you choose, where you put the workshops and how you solve this transportation question. But of course, it's a question: where are the workshops and how do we get the decoration to the buildings?
Thank you. We can get back to some other questions also when we have listened to Alexandra and Aviel. Alexandra, you are in a process as well, and I think you have been for a certain amount of time, as for both Achim and me now, that you are in a project that has not been yet decided, if I understand it right. So please, Alexandra, tell us about your project.
Hello to everyone. Hello from Düsseldorf. Thank you, Brigitte. Yes, and listening to Achim's presentation, it so much reflects what's happening here in Düsseldorf as well. We have been at it for some time now, about 2 to 3 years, where when the city council decided to do feasibility studies about the future of this old opera house, which has actually been built as a theater space in 1875. And during the Second World War, the front part had been destroyed and has been rebuilt in a modernistic after-war style and is also listed. So we have the same issues around being in a listed building and trying to work around it. And the backstage area is really much too small for a repertoire house as we are. And the results of these feasibility studies are now public, and they are very interesting because all these options that have been praised have come up with quite similar figures in terms of the renovation of the building with an extension to the building or with a new build, either here on the site or somewhere else. And so now the public engagement started, where the public of Düsseldorf can engage with and comment and discuss all these options that are now presented on a quite elaborate website since Tuesday. And we have started with the public engagement process that has quite a dynamic, because we have a new government, local government, since autumn. And since then, this issue has been pushed forward and has quite some speed now. And this government does now want to make all these decisions and also want to start with a new building within this legislation period. And so far, it has been quite a good engagement and good communication. And I want to show you something that we have done as an opera company to do our stakeholder management throughout this process, because it's all led by the city council, and Achim says there's like city council officers doing the planning, the feasibility studies, but we as an opera company have to come up with the ideas around a new opera house. And we have come up with 10 themes, which I want to show you now, which have been so useful in the last few weeks and months that we have presented all over. And so let me start this, these 10 themes that we have actually called it the Opera House 23+, because we do think that actually if all goes well and all the decisions are going to be made in time, then I think we are not going to open a new house before in the early 30s. And so the first topic that we have developed is about an opera house that will be a foundation for the future of us as a company, of the Deutsche Oper am Rhein, and also shapes Düsseldorf as a cultural city. And what we mean by that is that actually the location, the space, and the architecture will set the framework for our artistic program and the broad social attraction. So what we have said before, program and the building goes hand in hand. And with adequate professional working conditions, which we actually don't have right now, rehearsal rooms, which are also not on the site right now, but we want to plan have on site, and a studio stage, which also is something new for us. The contemporary and dynamic development of the art form will be possible. The second topic that we have identified is around sustainability. And again, I was so interested in listening to Paddy Dillon earlier today, this afternoon, about his new book. And we are aiming to build and plan a new opera house for Düsseldorf that's environmentally sustainable, and that will therefore also set international standards. And therefore, we want to be a pilot project and also trend setting on this field, and also be like an ecological lighthouse. And of course, we have to look at the materials and technologies used, but also already looking at our concept of our use of the rooms. We also focus on a very open and multiple use idea of spaces, because a multiple use of spaces contributes to sustainability. But this is something that will be a big aim and topic for planning this future house. An Opera House 23+ is also more than just an opera house. It's going to be a shared place for a very diverse urban city, and also contributes to the urban quality of life. So it will be designed as an attractive, barrier-free public building in a central location. So also here in Düsseldorf, it will be a challenge to find a location that is very central and big enough, and it will have a strong appeal and create a very clear civic identity for a very diverse urban society. So it should appeal to a very wide audience of different age groups, social groups, ethnicities, and lifestyles. This space should be open all day, as many other new houses are already. It should have a range of restaurants, cafes, ticketing, cultural encounters, morning and afternoon events, family-friendly activities, and so on. So it should be a place that's not only be used by audience members, but also for everybody who just passes by and wants to use the space. The fourth theme that we have identified is all around the programming of a space. Yes, we are a repertoire house and we want to stay and continue to be presenting repertoire, opera and ballet, but we also want to present it in a more varied way. With the combination of new technologies and also a very practical space will allow us productions in new formats, and also formats that are also used in our new studio stage that will be around a 400-seater with new possibilities, especially for innovative work and also collaborative working with other companies also within the city. Number 5 is the ideas around innovation and tradition. We want to combine both in an idea stage, that we have to actually the classical repertoire that we still want to produce and we are committed to, but we also want to show work of the 21st century, have world premieres, and sometimes we know that our big stage is just too big for it, and therefore with a second stage we can enhance that work. We also want to continue our very successful joint opera company together with Düsseldorf and Duisburg. We have 2 houses, so therefore the dimensions of the new build, especially the stage area, should be similar, and therefore our productions are going to be shared between the 2 houses also in future, which is also sustainable. Then as the next topic, we have the top quality that we are aiming for as a repertoire house with also very successful ensemble of singers. And so we want to be also more efficiently and economically by presenting our repertoire, which is now, right now, in the conditions we are in this old building, not possible. And so we have a very big ensemble of singers. We feel that is also for us important to also invest into the future of opera singers, and also with the Ballet am Rhein, we have a very successful ballet company. We have 2 big orchestras that we're engaging. So we want to also be an internationally renowned place for artists that are attracted by this space. One big topic that has been also welcomed to see as a point of these 10 themes by our stakeholders is tourism and the economical ideas around the new opera house that we are building, also building that attracts tourists, cultural tourists. And so it should be a famous architecture that should be the shell of an opera house 23 plus, and therefore a new landmark building, and therefore a magnet for tourists to come to Düsseldorf, and therefore have like for Düsseldorf, have the quality as a place to visit. And it should be open all day, as I mentioned before, also for visitors that only come as day visitors. And we know a lot about return of investment studies and know that actually cultural tourists are high spenders. So therefore that's important for us to mention again and again that investment, which is big investment into new building, has a payback. Number 8 out of 10 is that this opera should be a lively place also for young people. We have a very successful youth opera program here that does lots of engaging productions for young audiences. And we are unfortunately right now limited by the growth that we could have, by also the need that's out there, because we have just a lack of space. And therefore, with extra space that we have planned, it would allow us to do more, and with workshops, interactive artistic activities, and hands-on projects. Digitalization is also an important issue that we want to think about. It should be a cultural beacon in the digital world, and therefore an interface between the live and the digital. We have just started a pilot project called the Digital Foyer, where we are experimenting with new ways on engaging audiences digitally and do audience development in a different way. And this will all influence also the planning of our work and our engagement with the public. So work will be interwoven between the creation of the analog art and the digital art. And last but not least, this opera house for Düsseldorf 23+ is the place to be. So it has the best possible visual and acoustic quality, so no restricted view seats, and also supreme concert for the audience, and also have always an audience-oriented strategy in mind by planning this opera house. So it should be a vibrant place which is able to host, entertain, and impress the local, national, international visitors. And yeah, it should be a meeting point that is enjoyed by everyone and also creates a strong identity for Düsseldorf as a cultural city. These were my 10 slides. For us, the next steps are now that we are continuing engaging with online discussion and comments. We had our first online discussion on Tuesday, and when we presented these 10 themes, where you could see these colorful slides in German, one audience member asked in a blog, "Isn't that too much? Are you not asking for too much? This is just not feasible." And we said, well, we have to think big now, and we actually do a lot already, and we just want to do more of it. And we also want to learn from others. And yes, we are thinking big, and we try to cling on to it before they go and cut us in the space. So I think it's going to be exciting until autumn, where the City Council is going to decide on all these feasibility studies and the basis of this public engagement on, and the likelihood is the new build. All the parties are quite uniquely in favor of a new build, and also on the location already. So unlike Frankfurt, there is really the aim by the politicians here to decide at the same time of where it's going to be. And there are just a handful, not even a handful, locations that are currently discussed. And yeah, it's going to be an exciting time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for a very interesting presentation. And I have to say that I feel familiar or connected to you with the themes, because this is exactly more or less what we presented for our renovation and expanding of the building in the old house. And why I'm saying this is because I wanted to ask you, because I think what you're actually talking about is the importance of being or trying to include the public and the society in a very clear and very strong way. And as you now said that you had already your first digital meeting, I also wanted to ask you, by including the society in a very nice way, because I mean, your vision is very clear, and you also explain the outcome for the city by doing this in this way. Are you also preparing for some kind of fundraising, private fundraising incorporated?
Not yet. Interestingly, the city so far, it's a city council owned building. So it's actually going to be financed purely by the city. And so far I have heard that they can afford it and they want to afford it, and it should be solidly public funded. It depends on which site we're going to build on. If it's a private site and there has to be some economic deal behind it, then maybe it's going to be different. But so far, they say it's an investment into the very far future. And yes, it's going to be around 700 million euros, but it's worth it. And that's amazing to hear in Corona times, where all our cities in Germany have been hit very badly because of the lack in tax that they get now because of lack of open restaurants and trade. So therefore, but it is impressive. It is the commitment here in Düsseldorf is very strong, and it is such a pleasure to hear, whilst we are still not playing and not performing and not showing what we can do, that we can hear the commitment from all sides. And so far, it's really going to be publicly funded.
But it seemed to get everybody engaged, and I think that's the most important part, because then, of course, they will one day also understand why there has been put such an amount of money into a building like this. I also wanted to ask you, because it's a much bigger building, and as you're explaining, you're also your vision is also that you could program different ways and maybe do a lot more when you get the extra spaces. Are you encountering the fact that you also will have a bigger number of personnel in that case?
Yes, I think it's not going to be that much more, because we're also going to save a lot of travel and logistics upheavals that we have right now. We are on different sites right now. We would put much more under one roof. We would do all the rehearsals for the opera productions at the new site. We would bring in other departments where we're renting spaces right now. So I think it's going to even out more or less. But yes, if you double in size, and our concept has about twice the amount of square meters as we have right now, it means that it needs to be maintained, and it has to more floor space. But I don't think that as a company we're going to grow very much, no.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. We can get back to you with further questions also. Aviel, I think you're somewhere in a squared picture.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, you're here. And I think your project is quite different from what we have heard about now, because you actually are talking about a renovated building in Geneva. I think some of my staff here actually visited during the process also, and had a sort of showed what was done. And I think we heard that there were complications also that we might not know even before when we start a renovating project like you did. So please, Aviel, tell us about your project.
Yes, hello everyone. Actually, the project has been realized before I came here. The funny thing, of course, is when you talk then to politicians and board members, they said, oh, Mr. Kahn, when you will arrive in 2019, everything will be finished already in summer 2018, and you will find the perfect modernized building. Well, the reality was unfortunately not like that. First of all, the works were delayed, and the house opened much later than it, 7-8 months later than what was supposed to be the case, which forced a lot of extra costs, and the last season of my predecessor was very complicated. On the other hand, I also find out that what was sold or told to me, but also to the public, as an entirely full renovation of the house was actually not an entirely full renovation. And within the next years to come, we still have some phases of renovations to undergo in actually to bring this building, which in his historic building that was restored or modernized, to bring this on all levels on, let's say, a more or less up-to-date standards of the 21st century. I have a presentation which I hope will work when I share my screen. Does this work?
Yes, we can see it, absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, you can see the presentation?
Yes.
We now see your whole working document with the side slides.
You see the whole slide, the full slide?
Yeah, no, we see the notes.
Okay, well, I tried to go through this nevertheless. You can see the big picture. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not as good in this, but as long as you can see it, it's fine. So the Grand Théâtre de Genève was built in 1879, as you can see, and is a quite high, big-sized theater inspired by the Palais Garnier, and is still up to today the biggest stage, classical stage in Switzerland, actually. Now, what happened, what forced the renovation, different to what we have heard from Stockholm or Frankfurt or Düsseldorf, there was a big fire, more like La Fenice in 1951, which during a performance of Valkyrie, what else, where the house took fire and let's say could be partly preserved, but all the main hall and stage could not be saved and had to be redone totally, which was then reopened in 1962, actually. Nevertheless, the foyers and the front of house part was quite well preserved and was kind of relatively cheaply re-put in order for the opening of 1962. So the next big renovation, which was the renovation I'm talking to you, was the renovation that was done which was the renovation that started in 2016. And in this renovation, there was actually the ambition to rebuild the foyers, the front of house, in its historic splendor. And you can see the picture here in the middle that shows you how it looks today. And they also added some spaces for which was in the renovation from 2016, a new chorus room, new rehearsal spaces. The office part was renovated for the first time up to a modern standard. The main hall got air conditioning, and a new canteen was also made for the employees. The whole renovation costed 77 million Swiss francs instead of 67 million Swiss francs that were actually due to be the costs. This was mainly, but not entirely, caused by the delays of the works, which was caused, and that was, I think, Brigitta, what you were referring to. There was floodings underground because they digged, the building is quite deep underground in the floor, under the earth, and there they met some water, let's say, lines that they didn't know, or they were not aware they were as bad, and the flooding caused serious delays in the works. That was causing also, I think, pretty much 10 million more is not so dramatic when we think of more costs of other opera house renovations lately. What was done during, and that's an interesting thing for all of you renovating soon the theaters, for the intermediate stage, they were building this Opéra des Nations, which they called it, which was a theater building Geneva bought from the Comédie Française, which was used from them during their renovation time. And it was brought to Geneva at another space, at the Place des Nations, close to the United Nations buildings, where there was a big field where they could place this building. It costed around 13 million altogether. Not just the buying of the material from Paris was actually not the most expensive part, but all that has been rebuilt and added to it, to the shape that it was a theater that was successfully used during 4 years' time. And here are some images of the building from outside. It's a wooden structure with a wonderful acoustic because of it's built of wood. You see a theater of 1,118 seats. In Paris, it was only 700 seats, though they enlarged the building seriously. Compared to the Grand Théâtre de Genève, which has 1,500 seats, it was a bit smaller, but as this kind of theater, it had a very good size and to still permitted the opera to perform for almost similar audiences during 4 years. In Paris, there was no pit to the building because it was a theater building, so they built a pit to it. You can see the stage and the views from the stage, from the hall. You can see the pit. The stage opening was actually 15 meters wide per 77.5 meters height. The whole stage width inside behind the proscenium was 27 meters and the depth was 15 meters. So quite a big stage still. It had very nice foyers, as you can see here, well, kind of ephemeral foyers, but it was a building that was immediately, also from its structure, democratically very popular. It attracted new audiences because it was different from the historic theater building. And actually there were quite some people who hoped that the house would stay when the renovation was terminated, but actually as it was not a stable structure to stay forever, and as the area had to be used for other purposes, the theater was nevertheless sold to China. And so le Théâtre des Nations, as it was, the Opéra des Nations, it was called, doesn't exist anymore here in Geneva. Nevertheless, we have the plans of this structure, and it's certainly, if somebody's interested to know more about this theater, it's something we can advise and help if somebody's interested during a renovation to have really, let's call it a relatively luxurious situation during several years outside your own walls. I experienced it during my predecessor's time several times, and it was really a very nice theater with great acoustics and very good views from all seats. Now, what was not renovated during those years, and that's what I didn't know, was the stage machinery. And if you, as you can see here in my text, the stage machinery dates also from 1962. Highly sophisticated hydraulic scenographic equipment, as nowhere else in Switzerland, but quite old. Now, the upper machinery, as you can see, was renovated in 1998 for an amount of 17 million. A part of the hydraulic system of the lower machinery was partially changed to be connected actually with the electronic computer controlled stage system in 2006 and costed 6.4 million. Now there is this scenographic equipment for the lower and upper machinery, that is a computer system, was last changed in 97, 98. So really outdated if you think more than 20 years, but it was not touched during the renovation, strangely enough, between 2016 and 2019. So it is something we have to undergo actually right now in the months to come. And happily, we could contract the same company that did it in 1998 because we couldn't even find any spare parts anymore for this old computer control system. And the same company, happily, Bosch Rexroth, is doing the renovation right now, which is a renovation that took on the whole 7 months and asks us to close the theater between June and August for 3 months to fully install it. Well, we close the house actually, although we are not very open these days, not more than 50 to 100 people that we can host. Now, from June, it will be 100 people. From July, 1,000, but in July, we're closed for the summer break. So in any case, we use the summer break to do the main renovation and would have to do just one production in June from this year outside the house. This first, just the renovation of this part costs 5 million and will be entirely privately financed by private donors, which made it possible to very quickly come to a conclusion to do this renovation together, nevertheless, with the city, but privately paid. And then there is a next part, which is the under machinery, which you have seen, which dates from 62 with a light renovation in 2006. It has to be totally replaced because it's very old. We can't find any spare parts. And besides our own technicians of the Grand Theatre, nobody knows how to repair this if some problems occur. And we have from time to time problems. This is a big phase of renovation that was also not done between the big closure where we had our other theater where we could perform, and we have to do it. And as it looks, it's an 8 to 10 months renovation, which we are supposed to do probably in 2025, where we will have to close the house for 5 to 6 months and can do preparation when we're still performing, when we stop using some parts of the stage. So I hope also there, I won't have to close the house for 2 seasons or 1 entire season, but we will cut, as you see, the end of 1 season and the first part of the next season to still present the big part of the season in the Grand Théâtre. That's a renovation that will be costing around 15 million again. So you see, in Geneva, there seems to be a tradition to phase the renovation for some particular reasons. I'm just arriving here that I haven't understood yet, but I clearly said I don't want to close the whole opera house again for 2 seasons or something. So we split those several renovations, because after those 4 seasons outside of the Grand Théâtre, I don't think it would be a good message to the people here that we close again for 2 years the opera house. So we're phasing it, and we find a way to manage the house, to play in the house, I mean the old building. So no new visionary concepts how an opera house could be different. We have the visionary concepts more in what we are doing, what we are playing, and how we use the old house. One thing, which is my first picture to show you, is how you can use old inspiration to go to get new solution. You see the terrace here of the Grand Théâtre. Actually, this old building of the start of the 20th century, end of 19th century, convinced modern authorities to let us open a terrace and a restaurant in the Grand Théâtre, which was not the case at all in the last decennia. And this old building convinced them to let us have a terrace. And in the end of the second or third wave this spring, we finally opened, after more than 100 years, again, a terrace restaurant for the Grand Théâtre. So some old things can inspire new solutions also. So that's the end of my presentation. I don't know now how I end my screen saving. Maybe like this, yes.
There you are. And thank you very much for also a very inspiring presentation. I have to say that your case and my case are rather similar, because we have spent the last 4 or 5 years now for exchanging the upper and the under stage machinery for almost the same amount of money as you presented from Switzerland now. But I have to ask you, due to that fact, I would like to ask you, if you look back now, and you came, you just started for about a year ago in Geneva, if you would have had the possibility by choosing or working for a new house instead of renovating this house, what would you have chosen then?
Well, I think, as you know me, Brigitte, I would probably prefer a modern house than putting a lot of money in an old house. Now we have to say that this house is very big. It's a technologically really great stage. But of course, it's a nevertheless in the 1960s built hall that is a classical hall. And I think we could easier introduce new audiences, develop our audiences and our art form with modern houses than with houses that are designed for audiences of the 19th or of the 18th century. In Geneva, they didn't choose for that. And if we look the amount that it all costs, like the 77 million, and you add the 15 million and the 5 million, and the co-financing sometimes with private and public money, of course, this is just a good 100 million of Swiss franc, which of course is not the money for which you can buy a totally new building. So I guess at the time when it was decided in 2014 or 13 to do this renovation, they didn't have several hundred of million, or there was no political will to replace this, let's say, beautiful old theater that seems to be still one of the prides and joys of Geneva authorities and society.
Yeah, but I think what you said is very, very important, because you said there was no political will. And bottom line, it has to be a political will to actually receive a possibility of having a new building. And I think that is what Alexandra and Achim also have talked about, that you have a consensus within the political parties, and that is of course the start to get the project going. We have about 4 minutes to go, so I think we should open up for questions or comments. There are several of our members who has gone through either new building or renovation. So please come with your questions or your reflections on what we have been presented now.
I would like to ask a question. How the community face the news of all this money being invested on an opera theater? Because in these times, I know that your theaters are very well, legitimate and, lived and active and all this, but still there are a lot of money. And it would be interesting to know in these times how this, huge investments, worthwhile from my and our point of view, but I wonder if the community believes that it is worthwhile as well, and how do the politicians defend so huge investment in front of the community?
Alexandra, do you want to answer the question?
Yes, I think for us in Düsseldorf, it's an interesting case that to do nothing costs most. And I think there has been now quite a big transparency of how much it would cost to renovate the building, and not to hold back big numbers as one has done in other cities, where you come out with a small figure and then it gets more and more and more, and it becomes like a crisis or a disaster. And I think here they say we are honest, and they have also put contingency money in it, an inflation rate over 10 years, and therefore you come up with a very big number. But what we try to do here is to explain the number and break it down into its elements, and also tell that it costs a lot of money anyway. And I also think now is still, in this moment of time, a good time to get through it and to get a decision. It would probably be more difficult in a year or 2 years' time, where post-corona has maybe even more effect on the public as it has right now. We are still in a stage where we are still kind of hopeful that it's all going well, and therefore I think we have to kind of also take this moment now and get that decision and get it through, and be also very honest and transparent. And I think politicians have been open about this here.
Achim, do you have the same reflections, or?
Well, in Frankfurt at the moment, the discussion is not so much about the money. The discussion is about the ground, or where this, well, it does also mean money. It's that they can serve this ground in the middle of the city for a cultural use, and they don't want to give, in order to finance the project, for example, a part of the public ground to a bank house or something like this, which you have to do when you want to achieve the ground. So this is more the discussion right now. But this 800 million euros, which I was talking about, is not so much in the discussion right now. So I don't know when this will start, but the discussion is really about the ground.
That sounds promising. Definitely. And I think, Aviel, you actually answered the question, because you said the Opera House in Geneva is the crown of the city in many ways, which I think is also a very strong, of course, a strong accent to why they want to have it renovated and getting back to the shape as it was, I would guess.
But the interesting question is, now there is a big discussion in Geneva about building something they call a Cité de la Musique. It's a new concert hall which should also host the big conservatory, the Haute École de Musique de Genève. And this is a huge debate in the society here, and there has been a referendum against it. Now, this building would be totally privately paid a little bit like the opera in Copenhagen. But of course, afterwards, the running costs are the running costs of the Orchestre Suisse Romande and the Haute École de Musique and so on. But there is quite a lively discussion, and there are some movements in the city that want to prevent this to happen. These are green movements that think too many trees are cut. These are alternative cultural milieus that think that revendicate that they're not involved in the using of the building and that they have not been partnered in it. So they oppose it because they think afterwards it will cost more than what the costs are today for classical music, and it will be their damage. And then there is an old villa that has to be destroyed for building this Cité de la Musique, and there are some protectors of the old villas that are also against it. It's a lively debate. I think it's a healthy debate, but it shows that, I think also for Alexandra, I think you have to involve, you cannot say, this is for me, we are the opera, and this is going to be our reign. And this is maybe a bit the mistake that has been done here in the departure of the Orchestre de la Suisse Romande. You have to involve, you have to show, I think, if you want to convince the politicians and the public that this building will be a social encounter point, that all the arts can meet in an opera house, and it's not something for an exclusive elite or for the happy few to use. And if you can include that, I think it's much easier to get a positive attitude from all sides and investing in the future attractivity of your city. But if you miss this point and you are coming also, I don't know, in Parma, if they think this is just for the Verdi fans and all the rest is excluded, I think a new building, you could prove to them that opera could be many other things than just some arias and some happy tunes.
Well, apart from the last sentence about arias and happy tunes, I would say I agree totally with you. I think that's the most important part, actually, to really be able to explain the value for a lot of people and not just maybe the opera goers. I really go along with you there. And I think it was interesting to see that the vision in these 10 points, as you presented, the theme, as you called it, Alexandra, I think that's the way to go. You need to be, as you said, also with the stakeholders. Yeah, you need to be there. Do you want to say something more?
We need to find a language in these early stages of engagement. We have to translate our own expert ways of talking about arts and productions. We have to translate it in a speech that's really also for our non-attenders, and what do they get out of it. And so I think we had to, and we worked quite hard on the wording of these 10 theses and these blurbs of words, because that's also about making it understandable, coming up with examples, and I was actually thinking more openly and not just in our own bubble. So it was useful. What we did in these early stages, we had meetings with the individual parties of party politicians to say, what do they pick out of these 10? And everybody picked about 4 or 5 points out of it. And that was good, because we could see the Green Party went for this, the Conservative went for that, the left parties went for that. And therefore, you need to find your connecting points. And that's really important early on. Yeah. Because it is a lot of money, and it's taxpayers' money.
That's for sure. So we need to make them believe that they will get something more. And maybe one day the people who will get interested by the project and the process now even might be interested in opera in the end. But this is a start, and it's a good start. Thank you very much, Alexandra, Achim, and Aviel. And I think we have to close this session. And this is the end of the day also. So I think Nicola probably will say something about tomorrow. But I would also like to say, Nicola, you said that we will bring up in another session where we can connect even more to what is the vision for the opera house into the future? What kind of building would we like to have? And also when we talk about what Paddy spoke fantastically about this earlier in this session, about the climate and the responsibility for sustainability that we will have, ecologically and whatever. So it's a lot more to talk about in this concept. But thank you very much for this session. And Nicolas, are you somewhere? I
Yes,
think
of
you
course.
are.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you too, and for really interesting and cogent presentations. It's not the only ways to make opera for the future, but they're all very aware ways. And I'm conscious that even after all the different phases in Geneva of 15 million Swiss francs here and 5 there and so on, it still added up to a good deal less than the new builds in Frankfurt and Düsseldorf. Equally, I think there is a strong point to be made that where exciting new buildings have happened, they have themselves pulled audiences in. I mean, the classic example, of course, was Sydney, but it is also true of Valencia or Oslo or the Elbphilharmonie. And it is a way of connecting with the public. The added factor now is, and I know that you all have this very much in mind in your projects, is that part of the message has to be that the project is environmentally beneficial rather than just burning up more and more energy. And then, although they are large sums of money, what are governments for but to invest in infrastructure?
Well said, Nicholas. That would be the last one. Absolutely. I
can think of a lot of worse things they spend money on.
I have a session with the department of my minister on the 1st of June. Look, I will quote you, definitely.
What I should say is we will be delighted to see all and any of you tomorrow morning, punktlich at 10 o'clock, either to take part in the co-production marketplace, which Susanna has assembled an interesting array of new co-productions, despite all the warnings that I tried to make earlier this afternoon, or what are the prospects for fundraising in the new world in which we're now living. And we have a really good and varied panel on that, both at 10 o'clock. Audrey will tell you if you have to have different links for that, how to get in. I have no idea how that can be done.
I've received your links, and if you're here today, I suppose you have.
And I make a choice. I can't do both.
No, you'll have to get out of one and go to the other. They're at the same time, Nicholas, and until we all get some special gifts from God, we're stuck with that, one or the other.
No. So I'm not criticizing at all. I just wanted to know, because it's very easy, not just for me, but for other people to get it wrong. But you choose your link and be there at 10 o'clock in the morning. Very good. Have a lovely evening.
You too, Nicholas. Thank you very much, and thank you, Audrey. And
thank you, everyone.
See you tomorrow,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye. Some people are here at midnight or something. What time is it in China?
It's already midnight. Actually.
Wow. Good night.
Good night.
It was particularly nice to welcome you from NCPA China.
And Tokyo, which must be even later. Gosh.
Might be only to the north.
Well, you'll prefer it tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.